I want to say revelations, but it's revelation. It's a vision that God gives to John about the last days. It covers the time from when Christ, his first coming and his second coming. It's all called the last days. We like to think there's just a little time period at the end that's the last days, but it's all the last days. Because he's coming back. So it's like your teacher saying, I'm going to give you a test. I'll be right back. I just have to go to the principal's office, but I'm coming back. And when I come back, will be your final exam. So, you remember that the disciples were gazing up into the face of Jesus went, and then the angel appeared and said, why are you looking up there? He's coming back. But meanwhile, there's work you're supposed to do. I taught a class once, and I told the class, I'll be right back. Except to go to the principal's office. So I went one direction, but I gave them their assignment for what they were supposed to do while I was gone.
Right.
Now, I came back a different direction. They had posted a lookout so that they could play around. And the lookout was looking that way, because that's how as soon as I turned and hopped, he was going to say, okay, and they're going to act like they've been doing it all along. But I came up the other way and tapped the lookout on the shoulder and said, I got it from here, thank you. I just appeared in the class, and then I brought judgment upon those who had not been paying attention and doing what they were assigned to do. That is what Jesus is going to do. So he left, but he gave us an assignment to do and to work while he's gone. He's coming back in the twinkling of an eye, but no man knows the hour on purpose, because he wants to just step into the classroom to see, are we doing what he said to do? So he's not going to tell us specifically when he's coming back, but he gives us all these warning signs of what's going to be happening, and that's what the book of Revelation is all about. These are the warning signs. This is what we're supposed to look for to know when Jesus comes back. So there are three main sections. We've been through the first two. We're at the end of the second section. There were the 7 seals. There's like a history book that actually unfold each seal, then part of history is revealed to us. And we are learning, we are seeing what God is going to be doing up until the time that he comes. So there are going to be warning signs. There will be warning signs for non-believers. So we know, if you're a believer, then you get to look at that warning sign and go, okay, that means God is coming. If you are a non-believer, you just think, that's nothing. That doesn't mean anything. But in the 7 seals, as each one is revealed, things are getting worse and worse and worse in the earth. The reason they're getting worse and worse is so that we'll go, boy, this is terrible, and cry out to God. That's why he's turning up the heat, hoping that we'll look for the air conditioning button. You know, it's not just put up with the heat, but actually go, somebody needs to do something about this. Who can solve this? Only God can solve this. So he makes conditions such that we are supposed to think that only God is going to be able to deal with this, and we start to cry out to him. Because that's his goal, to get us to cry out to him. Now, he would prefer we just cry out because he said cry out. But that's the same thing that happens to Christians in the church. God would prefer that we come and pray to him every day just to do it. But sometimes we wait until the rent is due, or until we're in the hospital, or until we can't find our child, or some horrible thing, and then we're at the altar, oh Jesus, and then we're crying out. So God always preferred that we just came and do it anyway, without all of that. But he knows our heart, and sometimes he has to let things get pretty bad so that we will cry out and seek him, and then he can give us the answers. God doesn't ever force the answers on us. He wants us to knock and ask, and then he gives us the answers. Knock and I'll open the door. Seek and you'll find. But he doesn't just force anything on us. That is the horrible thing about free will. He gave it to us. It's a blessing and a curse. He doesn't make us do anything. A lot of people think, I wish God would just make us, but he doesn't. He wants us to choose to do the right thing and choose to call on him. So he gives us incentives. So that's what's going on in the book of Revelations. So we looked at 7 seals. We are now at the end of 7 trumpets. And the 6th seal, the 6th trumpet, those are always the day of judgment when the person we call the Antichrist, when that beast comes and is going to take over the world, and there's going to be a big war. That always happens at number 6. So there are 6 seals, and on the 6th, there are 7 seals, but on the 6th seal, that's when the day of judgment comes, and there's going to be a big war. There are 6 trumpets, and that's when the day of judgment comes, there's going to be a big war. That is why he says his number is 6, 6, 6. We're about to go to the 6th bowl. And when they are revealed, when they are poured out, it's the 6th one, again, is the day of judgment. The 6th one. So his number is 666. So now he's describing. Oh, do you need any help or anything?
I'm trying to hear if you have to wait so I can move up the tape so I can go over here.
Okay, no, you have a problem. There's no problem. Just want to need assistance.
But I'm not regretful. You come so bad.
Oh, see, I know. I surprised everybody. You showed up on time. This is shocking. Didn't give everybody a chance to prepare. So, where we are in the book of Revelation, he's describing the beast. The beast. So, let's look at Revelation chapter 13. The second sentence in the first verse. We talked about the beast last week.
Here is the man which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits.
Wait, are you on at the very top?
No, Revelation 17, 19.
No, Revelation chapter 13. The very top. We're just starting at the very top, the very first sentence.
Yeah, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads.
So I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads. We discussed again that the sea means the world of the Gentiles. The land means the world of the Jews. So you see the sea, he's not literally rising out of the sea. He's rising out of the land, the world of the Gentiles. So this is not a Jew. The beast will be a Gentile nation. Because I saw the beast having 7 heads. Now, later on in Revelation chapter 17, he explains who these 7 heads are. So we're just going to skip ahead to that so that we understand what he's talking about. Revelation chapter 17, verse 9 and 10.
Here is the mind which has wisdom. 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, but the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time.
So here's the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. The woman is Israel. Just like we became the bride of Christ, he always describes Israel as a woman. Remember the prophet that went out and married a prostitute?
Hosea.
I know you're thinking I'm talking about
Say that again.
who?
Say that again.
There was a prophet who went and married a prostitute.
Okay.
Now he married her on purpose. Because he was saying, this is Israel. And you're the prostitute. And God is upset that you are always whoring around with other gods. So he married a prostitute kind of to demonstrate that you're supposed to be faithful to Israel. And several times in the Old Testament, Israel was referred to as the woman, just like we're always referred to as the bride of Christ. So when he says the woman was sitting on 7 mountains, that is 7 periods in Israel's history. she said, I always look at you, and sometimes you're just thinking, where's my laundry? But I'm always thinking she's like not understanding something, so that's my own paranoia. Is there anything I said that you do not understand?
Oh, I was just trying to remember where you are. I don't know about the 7 mountains, but that's all I was trying to catch up in my head.
Right, okay.
You know, I'm not concerned for my own head.
Right. I'm just saying you need to be concerned about anything. It's me, like, paying too much attention to your face. I'm not saying it could be anything that you're frowning about. You might have, you know.
So where are we ending since you stopped?
We're just right there at the beginning. We're just starting out.
Okay, okay.
So the woman is always Israel. And she says she's sitting on 7 mountains. So I want you to imagine, right, 7 mountains in a row. These are 7 time periods in Israel's history. 7 time periods in Israel's history. Israel was supposed to be faithful to God, but they wouldn't be faithful to God, and so God would allow other nations to take them captive or occupy her. So there are 7 times in Israel's history where they were not faithful. How are you doing? And so we know that they were the Babylonians, the Medes, the Persians, it was Syria, and Egypt. Those are 5 times when Israel was unfaithful and God allowed Jerusalem to be occupied by a foreign power. A couple of those times, Jerusalem was actually taken away. The Jews were taken away from Jerusalem and then brought back. But there were foreign powers that occupied Jerusalem because she started whoring with these other nations. Jerusalem started listening to these other nations instead of listening to God, making treaties with these other nations instead of waiting for God to take care of their problems. We mess up when we don't wait for God to solve it and we pick some other solution, some other way of solving the problem that has nothing to do with what God has told us to do. So there are 5 times in Israel's history. So it says, these 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. So each time these nations are represented by a king, just like Hitler represented Germany or Stalin represented Russia. There's a dictator, a king over these nations. It says 5 have fallen. So I mentioned the 5. 1 is. So at the time of this writing of the book of Revelation, there was one nation that was occupying Jerusalem. What nation was that? Rome. Rome, right. So it was the Roman soldiers that came and tried to take Jesus. It was the Roman. So Rome is the nation that occupied Jerusalem, that is controlling it. The Jews still live there, but they're under Roman rule. So it says there are 5 have fallen. 1 currently is, that's Rome, and 1 has not yet come. So at the time of the writing, when John was writing the Revelation, Rome is the nation that's controlling Jerusalem, and they're just about to crush it, like Jesus predicted, and scattered the Jews. In 70 AD, they destroyed the temple. By 120 AD, they had scattered the Jews all over the world. And for a 2,000-year period, there was no Jews occupying Israel at all. In 1948, Israel became a nation again. It was as a result of Hitler trying to exterminate all the Jews. He killed 6 million Jews with the Holocaust during World War II. The United Nations got together and said, we got to do something to protect Jews. They need a nation, because for 2,000 years, wherever the Jews go, for some reason, but we know the reason is the devil, is the beast, that nation begins to hate the Jews and try to kill them. All throughout their history, for 2,000 years, wherever the Jews have gone, at a certain point, that nation hates the Jews. They become a threat and tries to kill them, and so they've been just living from nation to nation, nation to nation to nation. And in 1948, the United Nations said, let's get them their own homeland, and they chose to send them back to Israel. So it says 5 have fallen, 1 currently is, but 1 kingdom is yet to come. 1 kingdom is yet to come that is going to occupy Israel. Now for 2,000 years, this didn't make any sense. It wasn't until 1948 when Israel became a nation again they go, oh, okay, now there is some country that can attack Israel and occupy it again. So the beast represents those 7 kingdoms, 5 that have fallen, 1 that currently is, and then 1 that's coming. And when he comes, that king of that nation, he must stay for a while, but just a short while. Then he's going to occupy. So, in today's term, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and northern Egypt and Turkey, those areas, those are all nations that have attacked Israel. They're in the news again today. Rome would be the 6th, and some other nation from that region is going to attack Israel and occupy it. So, back to Revelation chapter 13, it says, I saw a beast rising up out of the sea having 7 heads. In Revelation chapter 13, the second part of verse 1 says,
And 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns.
So, skipping ahead to Revelation chapter 17, let's find out what those 10 horns are. Verses 12 to 13.
The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as of yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast.
So whatever nation is going to eventually try to attack Israel, they're going to be able to get 10 other kings from nations around to join in with them in that attack. There's going to be an alliance. So I'm making this up. I'm making this up as an example. This is what it is. But if Russia decided to attack Israel, perhaps they get Syria, they get Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all these different countries, these kings of these countries, to join with them in an alliance to occupy or to attack Israel. So he says that one beast is going to get all these other 10. They don't have kingdoms right now, but at that time, once the beast decides to do that, once his kingdom decides to do it, those kings will be in power and they will align together to attack Israel. All of the world will be involved like we are today. If Iran does something to Israel, the United States is going to have to get involved, and then Russia's going to have to get involved, and then North Korea's going to. We all will get involved. The whole world will get involved. There will be a chain of events. To either be on one side or the other. So again, this is saying this was not possible until this last century. So even though John predicted it 2,000 years ago, we thought that was impossible, but now we're in a position where it can happen. So back to Revelation. We're just reviewing what we talked about last week. Revelation chapter 13, verse 3.
And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and the deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast.
So one of the heads, one of the kingdoms, possibly, or one of the leaders of the kingdoms, will appear dead and then come back to life. Now it could be a nation that we aren't thinking much about, doesn't have much power. That nation is all dried up. It hasn't. Many of the nations in the Middle East for 2,000 years were useless. It wasn't until oil was found in them that suddenly the whole world was focused on them. So some nation that appears dead will come back to life, or literally a king of one of these nations that will appear, we will think that person is dead and will come back to life. But either way, whether it's the king of the nation or the nation itself, the whole world will marvel and begin to worship that nation. Okay? So, here's skipping ahead to Revelation chapter 17, because that's when they give more information about, in Revelation chapter 17, they give a lot of information about the beast. In chapter 13, where we are, he just says it a little bit, so sometimes I'm just skipping ahead to 17 to give us more clarity. So in Revelation chapter 17, verse 14, it says,
The beast.
actually, verse 11, but go ahead.
Well, I don't know. Oh, is it 17, 14?
Oh, try 14.
14. Beast that was and is not, is himself also the 8th, and is of the 7th, and is going to perdition.
Okay, so perdition is different than fallen.
Go ahead.
Those kings have fallen. So the beast So again, that might have, there's an 11 next to it, so when you look in Revelation chapter 17, it may be actually verse 11, and I just called it 14. Because I see the 11 and I see the 14. So.
Now I'm gonna go like, wait, what?
Well, I know. So when you go back to your actual chapter 17, you tell me it was 11 and 14. So the beast that was and is not. So we're talking about that kingdom or that king who was alive and then died and then come back. He said he himself is really kind of the eighth. He's calling him the eighth because the kingdom existed, then it's like dead for a while, and then it comes back to life. He says it's really, I would call it the eighth, but it's not the eighth. It's really of the seven. It's one of the seven. I'm just calling it the eighth because it was alive for a while and then died and then came back. So it was Persia and it died and now it's Iran. Right, he came back. So he's really of the seven. I'm just calling it the eighth. But it's going into destruction. It won't fall. That kingdom will stay alive until Jesus comes back and actually will be destroyed. It won't just fall like the others fell and became less powerful. It will stay alive until after the actual war when Jesus comes back, the war of Armageddon. And then it will just be destroyed. Going to prediction, which means destruction. Okay, so back to Revelation chapter 13, verse 5.
He was given a mouth speaking of great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months.
So that's 3.5 years. Now there's a 7-year period that Daniel talked about. There's a 7-year period. And when Daniel talked about it, he divided it in half. There's 3.5 years where there's warning and 3.5 years of war. So if you think back to Noah, Noah preached for however many years to warn everybody, and then the flood came. John the Baptist was here during Jesus' time. Jesus was here ministering for 3.5 years, and then the destruction of the temple took 3.5 years. So there's always warning and then destruction. So he's saying this beast, he will speak great things, but he's going to blaspheme, and he's going to give authority for 3.5 months. So he'll be in power for 3.5 months speaking great things, saying, worship me. I'm sorry, 3.5 years, speaking great things. Worship me, worship me. And all the world's going to believe him and really think he's the Messiah. The world's going to go, wow, that person, look at all their, he said, how incredible he is. And the world will be fooled. Then he will turn on Israel. So he's actually going to make a covenant with Israel. He's going to come as a world peacemaker. I'm the one who can solve everything. And people will begin to worship that person and believe that person instead of believing God. It's a subtle thing. So this chapter is full of warnings for Christians. It says you can be fooled. So because this person will say, well, I'm here to give peace. All you have to do is do it my way and just buy my products and sleep in my hotel or whatever, you know. Just do my thing and I can solve all of this for you. People will, let's follow this person. He's going to solve everything. And so, but they're going to speak blasphemies. This person will put themselves above God. It's very subtle. But people will say, I have all the answers. That's different than God has given me some answers for you. That's different. Because God gets credit in one, the other way you get all the credit. So speaking blasphemies means that you say it's you are the end all. You are the one everybody needs. I am the person that can solve it all for you. And people begin to put their faith in the person, not in the God who sent the person. So we have to always be careful of that. But those are the blasphemies. Blasphemies mean that you're saying it's me and not giving credit to God. So he's going to be speaking blasphemies, boasting about himself. And everybody will buy it. And we are susceptible to that. Not just our church, but the world. If anybody who walks in and says, look what great thing I did, great thing, you go, well, we should look to that person, look how incredible they are. And people will give their faith over to this person. Then, in the second 3.5 years is when he turns on Israel. So first he makes a covenant with Israel, Then he turns and then there's a war for 3.5 years. All this terrible stuff is going to happen. So he's given authority to continue for 3.5 years. While he is in making his covenant with Israel, we read last week about the 2 witnesses. There will be 2 witnesses that will look like Moses and Elijah. They will have that kind of, and they'll be saying, don't believe him, don't believe him, don't believe him. Do you remember what happened to the 2 witnesses? They're killed, right? Oh, you may not have been here, but the 2 witnesses will be killed. And we read that people will send presents to each other. They'll be so excited that these witnesses are dead. So they'll have a party. Oh, I'm so glad they were such a pain. I'm so glad that person is in. Because we don't like prophets. We don't like the person that says, that's wrong, you shouldn't do that. Stop it. It's not like, oh, I wish that person would just go away. So people will send presents. Then it says, but after 3.5 days, their bodies will just lie in the streets. No one will even bury them because they'll be so excited that they're finally shut up. It's like, don't upset this person. We're putting our trust in that person and you're going to make him mad. So when they finally shut up, it's like, oh, thank God. And then after 3.5 days, it says they will rise and they will be taken up and people will see it happen. And then they will choose to either believe it's real or not. But everybody will see it. But you know how we are. Ain't nobody ever gone to the moon. They faked that. They didn't really destroy the Twin Towers. That was just a movie. I mean, stuff can happen right in front of us. And we have a way to say, that's not real. We can see somebody get out of a wheelchair. We can see all sorts of stuff. And we either go, wow, that's God, or we say, nah, it's not real. So even though people will see them rise from the dead, they'll just say, well, they never were dead in the first place.
Is it just those 2 who rise, that's the witnesses that were killed, or is that the time frame when the dead in Christ will rise?
No, that's a different time.
Okay.
So these are just rising as a sign.
Okay.
The moment we thought it was Moses and Elijah was because of how they're described. Like one is turning the sea water to blood, like Moses did when he went to Egypt. One is bringing fire from the sky, like Elijah did. We know that when Jesus was on the Mount of Transfiguration, that Moses and Elijah appeared to him. Elijah never died. Remember, he was just taken off in the chariot, and they never saw Moses die. There's a scripture that said when they came to get his body and take him away, that Michael and the devil were fighting over his body and take over his dead body. We don't know that he was ever buried, and so Moses may have just been taken away. So they're still waiting. So that's their death. Their death actually happens because they never have died yet, Moses and Elijah, as far as we know in the Bible. And so maybe that's when they die. But then they'll rise and go up to heaven. And so as a sign, so God is warning people because judgment is coming. He's trying to warn people. This is getting very serious. And so we're going to see huge signs to warn us. Now, Revelation chapter 13, verse 11 through 12.
Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth.
So when it says earth, that means land. That should be translated land. So the sea is always talking about the Gentiles. The land is talking about Israel. That's how the Bible separates them. The sea is the world, the Gentiles, the land is Israel. So I saw this other beast came from Israel. He is Jewish.
Yep.
Go on.
And he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon.
So he has 2 horns like a lamb. He's going to make you think he's a lamb, but he's actually speaking like a dragon. So we have to be careful and listen to what people say. Because just you can show up in a 3-piece suit and with a huge cross. I'm not describing anybody specifically, you know. And look like you're really holy, but what you're really saying is the devil's word. So he said, be careful. He will look like a lamb, but he's actually speaking like the dragon, like the devil. Go on, Raquel.
He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. He causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed.
So this guy who we call later the false prophet is like his hype man. So the beast is now this world leader who's made a covenant with Israel, and he's going to have a prophet who comes before him who's able to do miracles and to convince everybody to worship him. So he's the devil is imitating Jesus. Because there was John the Baptist who was saying, you should worship Jesus. He says, well, I'm at my own John the Baptist, that everybody worship me. So there'll be a false prophet who will be there and who will get everybody to worship this Antichrist who's coming. Revelation chapter 13, verse 15 to 17.
He was granted power, excuse me, he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead.
So, two things. There could actually be a large statue of the Messiah that's built that he causes to speak and worship that image. When he says worship the image of the beast. Or, if John is seeing today or 50 years from now, the image of the beast might appear on a huge widescreen television, which we have all over it. So you go to stadiums today, and they're 90 feet high. You go to Times Square, it's 90 feet high, right? These big screens. And if somebody were to come on and speak and say, hey, everybody, that's how, because the book of Revelation says the whole world will see them. And you think, how is the whole world going to see it? Well, now that we have television, the whole world can see anything that happens, right? We can all be watching the same thing. So he's going to cause it's my interpretation, he's going to cause every station, every channel to play this one thing. And he will come on and say, I am now here I've solved it all, and I need everyone to, let's all join together, all you nations. Because remember, he looks like a lamb, but he's talking to the devil for it. All you nations, come and join with me, and we'll have world peace finally if you just do it my way. So there's a person who causes everybody, John saw the person who made that happen. So to me, it could be a statue, but when he says the image, it doesn't say statue, it just says the image. I think John, from the first century, was looking at the 21st century or 22nd century and saw the image of the beast come alive and start to speak. He knew it wasn't this man, he knew it was his image. So this is his language. Somebody from the first century trying to describe what they saw 2,000 years later. That he made that image come to life and everybody worshipped it. He made it speak. So I think it's his hype man, the guy who put that together, put him on every television. This is my interpretation. It could easily be a statue that comes to life and starts talking. But I just think, it doesn't say statue, it just says image. And I think that's what John was saying.
That's what Genesis says, let's make man in our image.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't mean like a statue. But that we see his image on the screen, probably. And it starts speaking and everybody worships, everybody believes. Then it says, and then he makes everybody see a mark on their hand and on their forehead. So this is where the Bible is not literal. We're about to look at Deuteronomy chapter 11. We know when we say we're going to write God's name in our hearts, that God's not going to take out a Sharpie and open our chest and write his name on our hearts. We know that means it's a spiritual, it's a physical image of a spiritual thing that happens. Well, it's the same thing he's talking about, the mark on the hand and in the head. I'm sorry?
Or hand.
Or head, right. So when he says the same thing, it's not physically taking a mark on your hand or your head, but like in Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 18.
Therefore you shall lay up these words of mine in your heart and in your soul.
So it doesn't mean that you literally have to take the Bible and try to stuff it into your physical heart. We know what that means, right?
And bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes.
So that means, just like it doesn't mean physically on your hand, it means bind them on your hand. Like everything that you do should be based on my word. That's when he says bind them on your hands and on your eyes. In your head, I want you to always be thinking. Thou shalt keep them in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on thee. So you always need to be thinking about my word and always doing what I commanded you to do. But he didn't literally mean tie a Bible to your forehead. because that doesn't make you holy. People buy huge Bibles every time I go to the Bible bookstore. People buy really nice brand new Bibles, but that doesn't make them you a Christian because somebody hands you a Bible. You can carry around the Bible all the time. It's are you doing it? It makes you a Christian. Is he on your mind all the time? You know, that lets you know that you're following God. So he doesn't mean physically. So it's the same thing in Revelation. All the people who are doing what the beast tells them to do and are always thinking about him and worshiping him, you're going to be in trouble. All people who are doing what God tells you to do and thinking about him, you're going to be safe. So it's not a literal mark on the hand or in the head. It's like, who's doing? Are you taking his mark in your hands and in your head? Are you doing his bidding? Or are you doing the bidding of Jesus? Okay, so now back to chapter 13, Revelation chapter 13, verse 17 through 18.
That no man may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name.
So I used this example last week, and I was reviewing last week, and we'll go ahead to chapter 14, which is where I want to be. If, like it was in the days of Nazi Germany, if you didn't say, yes, I'm a Nazi, even if you weren't, you couldn't, they would close your store. You couldn't buy or sell unless you swore allegiance. You didn't have to get a swastika on your hand, but you had to swear allegiance. Unless you said, yes, I follow this, they stopped you from doing everything that you wanted to do. And so, no one can buy or sell unless you have sworn your heart to him, your mind to him, your hands. You won't be able to buy or sell at a certain point unless you take his side, because this world leader will have gotten all these nations to buy in, especially in the Middle East, to what he is doing and saying, okay, so, and here is wisdom, verse 18.
Here is wisdom, let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666.
So he says, so I believe that he said there's going to be 7 seals. When you get to number 6, that's the beast. That's the day of the Lord, the day of his wrath. But the 7th is when he shows up, God shows up and wins. So he's trying to let everybody know that he can only go so far. 6 is his limit. 6 is his limit. So he said, do not give up. Don't give in. Because he's only 6. God is number 7. There's always the next day that's coming when God is going to come through. So he's saying you're going to be tempted because it's going to look like the devil is winning. But his number is 6. Don't forget, on the 7th day, that's the Lord's day. That's when God's going to show up and he's going to win. He's going to stop. So calculate his number. Understand that, because I'm laying this out chronologically, God is saying for you. You'll see this time, and this time, and this time, and then suddenly this man will show up, he's going to solve everything. So here's what God's doing. He's I'm sending this plague, I'm heating up the earth, and then this man is going to show up and solve it all for you. Actually, I did all this stuff so that you cry out to me, but a lot of people are going to cry out to him. So he's number 6. But that's as far as he's going to go. Because don't forget, on the 7th seal, that's when God shows up and puts the devil in prison. When the 7th trumpet sounds, that's when God shows up and he defeats him. So, and it's going to be the same thing when we get to the 7 bowls, or vials is what the King James says. Don't forget, I always come through on number 7. I always come through, so do not give up. So just know that his number is 6. Man can only go to 6. God goes to 7. That's when God wins, right? And that's why 6 days you can work, but on the 7th day, that's my day. All you got is 6 days, but just know on the 7th day, you don't have to do anything. God shows up and he does it all. So just understand that, and that's where we ended last week. Now we start Revelation chapter 14.
Then I looked, and behold, a lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 had his father's name written on their foreheads.
So these people were introduced earlier in Revelation chapter 7, the 144,000 Jews. So during this time period, when Israel has made a covenant with this bad guy, when Israel has made a pact with Iraq, I'm just making, it's going to, some other country, United Arab Emirates, whoever, I'm just making it up, right? There will be 144,000 Jews. Now that's not a literal number. That just means there will be 12. 12 was an important number. There was 12 disciples. There was 12 children of Israel. So 12 times 12 just means there'll be a whole bunch of Jews from this tribe, from this tribe, from this tribe, from this tribe, who will wake up and go, wait, this is wrong. This man is wrong. Do not believe him. Do not believe what he says. And so there's 144,000, which means 12 times 12, who will not believe him. So, I grab somebody's paper. There's writing on my paper.
She was calm, yes.
Yes, she was calm. She didn't say anything. She could have just stopped me right away. Okay, so there's 145. So they talked about him first in Revelation chapter 7. I want you to notice something about this. So Revelation chapter 7, verse 4, and we're going to read these. I left out all this other stuff, but so someone read Revelation chapter 7, verse 4.
And I heard the number of those who were sealed. 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. Of the tribe of Judah, of the tribe of Reuben, of the tribe of Gad, of the tribe of Asher, of the tribe of Naphtali, of the tribe of Manasseh, of the tribe of Simeon, of the tribe of Levi, of the tribe of Issachar, of the tribe of Zebulun, of the tribe of Joseph, of the tribe of Benjamin.
Do you notice anything peculiar about those 12? No, there's no reason why you should unless you went off to Hebrew school for 10 years or something. But can anybody see anything about those 12 tribes? Ernest, do you see him? I know Joey does. I'm ignoring Joey. I'm sorry?
Jacob's sons?
Right. Yeah, Joseph's, yeah, they're Jacob's sons. Those are the 12 tribes. He names 11 of the sons. One is left out.
Joseph.
Well, Joseph,
Is Judah?
the reason why Joseph's sticking out to you, Joseph had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh.
Oh, Ephraim.
Ephraim and Manasseh, right? He had two sons. So normally Joseph's not mentioned. Normally they just say Ephraim and Manasseh. But Joseph is mentioned, and his son Manasseh. That means somebody got squeezed out. Because normally the reason why his two sons were mentioned is because Levi didn't get his own land. When the children of Israel they crossed the Jordan, the Levites, they didn't have their own place. God assigned some of the Levites to live in each of those 12 places. But they weren't supposed to get their own place. The people were supposed to support the Levites. Those are the priests. And so they were supposed to bring their sacrifices into the temple and support them. And so they didn't get their own place. So Joseph's two kids, Manasseh and Ephraim, they divided, they each got a place. So that made 12. So she took out one. You put one of Joseph's sons in, and that still makes 12. Well, in this list, Joseph is mentioned last. But about 3 or 4 names above him, is Manasseh is also mentioned. And Levi is mentioned. Good question. Dan is left out. I know my brother knows. I never call him. Dan is left out. Now, that's not an accident. Dan did something wrong that he got left out. And yes, sir.
I don't see Ephraim in here either. But is that
No. Joseph and Manasseh. Joseph represents Ephraim.
Okay.
So his two sons took his place. One took his place, the other took Levi's place.
Is there a reason?
But Levi is what?
Is there a reason why they mentioned Manasseh and not Ephraim?
Yes.
Okay.
But and just call it Joseph? Well, yes, there is. But I'm going to explain it. So But Dan is totally left out. So Joseph is Ephraim represented by his dad. Ephraim is represented by his dad. But Dan is totally left out of this list. It's not by mistake. Let's investigate what Dan did, the tribe of Dan did. So look at Judges, chapter 17. So I tried to, we're going to look 2 chapters, but I tried to just get the highlights here. Verse 1.
Now there was a man from the mountains of Ephraim, whose name was Micah.
Okay, so Ephraim, so the 12 tribes are supposed to cross over the Jordan, right? They've been wandering out the wilderness for 40 years. All 12 tribes are supposed to cross over. A couple tribes didn't cross over. Gad didn't cross over, for one, because they disliked where they were on their side. They never crossed over. And so later we know that the demoniac of the Gadarenes came from Gad, because they never crossed over the other side of the Jordan, and it eventually became just a place full of demons. But they repented ultimately. So 11 tribes cross over, and Joshua tells them what to do. If you go there, you go there, you go there, you go there, you can have your land. Judah does it. Judah goes and they conquer those people and they establish their land, and Bethlehem is there, and that's where Jesus was born, in Judah, and we call them the Jews to this day because they're strong. Ephraim, they went and they established their land. They eventually built a rival temple to the one in Judah, and Ephraim eventually led everybody, and they all went into captivity. The 10 tribes followed Ephraim. So I always describe it as like Northern and Southern California. Ephraim would be San Francisco, and Judah would be Los Angeles, right? And so 10 tribes followed Ephraim, and only 2 followed Judah, Benjamin and Judah. So that's eventually what happened. But Ephraim did what they're supposed to do. Judah did what they're supposed to do. God doesn't mind if you, as long as you repent, he's cool with it. Dan never repented. So there was a man, it says, who was from the mountains of Ephraim, because they had established their land. And so he lived in the mountains of Ephraim. His name was Micah. Go to verse 5.
The man Micah had a shrine and made an ephod of household idols, and he consecrated one of his sons who became his priest.
So instead of worshiping where God told him to worship, he made his own shrine. He made an ephod, he made a robe, like a cloak, so that, and he made his own little idol, and he consecrated one of his sons and made him a priest, and had his own church and home. Okay, I'm not against church and home, but there's a problem when you establish your own religion and you never fellowshipping with other Christians. When you're never fellowshipping with other Christians, you just do your own thing, you leave yourself open for error. And some people say, oh, I don't need to go to church, I'm good, but you have no one to correct you. You have no one to say, oh, I don't think so, and over that, right? And so the devil can come in and tell you anything, and no one's there to say, that's the devil. So he made one of his own sons his own priest, and he's kind of established his own religion. Okay, so we'll go on, verse 6.
In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah. He was a Levite who was staying there.
So remember the Levites don't have their own place to stay. So some of them stayed in Judah, some of them stayed in Benjamin, they all stayed in different places. They don't have their own place. So this priest from Judah is looking for a place to stay, because he's not getting enough attention where he's at. He's only being able to preach on the 3rd Sunday, but he wants to preach on the 3rd and 4th. I'm making this up. You know, or he wanted to teach his own Bible study, but somebody else was doing it. He just wasn't able to be used as much as he wanted to be used. So he says, I'm going to leave here. So that's what we do when we don't get our way. Well, I'm going to go to a church where I get to be heard and get to be important, because my goal is to be important. Not to do what God says, but to be important. So this priest was not getting enough attention in Judah, so now he's wandering around looking for a new place to stay. He runs into Micah. Go on, verse 2.
Micah said to him, dwell with me and be a father and a priest to me, and I will give you 10 shekels of silver per year as food goes and your sustenance. So the Levite.
So to be like, yeah, he says, be my priest. Because remember, I got my own temple in my own house. I don't go to the church everybody else goes to worship with them. I got my own temple. So I'll pay you and you can be my priest and bless my food, and I'll go to you and ask you what I should do and not do, and then you can bless me and give me advice, and you be my own personal pastor. Verse 13.
Then Micah said, now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since I have a Levite as priest.
So here's his justification. So you can, it's like, I can do whatever I want. Like, I'll go to that strip club, but I'm going to wear my cross. So I know God's going to be okay with it. Well, no. You can't just do whatever you want, but you know, I crossed myself first. Or I said a prayer before I did it. Before I went to that whorehouse, you know, I prayed to God. I read the chapters of Genesis. That doesn't make it okay what you're about to do. So this priest, Micah's thinking, I got a priest now. So I know God's going to just bless me. Well, and the exact opposite happened. But remember, he's from Ephraim. Ephraim, they went up north and did their own thing. They eventually repented. Dan did. But God is going to want the temple down south in Judah. And so he's just thinking, I can do my own thing. But God's going to be cool with it because they got a priest. Okay, Judges chapter 18, now the very next chapter, verse 1 through 4.
In those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of
the Danites
was seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in.
Like they call us the Good Shepherdites, or the First Baptistites. So they were the tribe of Dan, which is called the Danites. So they were seeking an inheritance for themselves to dwell in. They hadn't done what God told them to do. God told them specifically, I want you to go down to 83rd Street and claim it and get those gang members out of there and clean it up, and I will give you a church there. But when they got there, they went, oh, those gang members look scary. Let's go find somewhere else better. So Dan had not done what God told them to do, so now they've got no place really to dwell. So they sent out some spies, try to find us a place to go, because what God told us to do is too hard. God must be mistaken, because that's too difficult. And when things get difficult, we think God was mistaken. Well, this is too hard. This couldn't be God, because God never makes you anything hard. Yes, He does. Okay, so they're looking for a place to dwell in, or until that day. Go ahead.
For until that day, their inheritance among the tribes
of Israel.
Oh, sorry.
I did the same thing.
Sorry. The tribes of Israel had not fallen to them. So the children of Dan sent 5 men of their families from their territory, men of valor from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and search it. They said to them, go, search the land. So they went to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. While there, at the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of a young Levite. They turned aside and said to him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What do you have here? He said to them, thus and so Micah did for me. He has hired me, and I have become his priest. So they said to him, please inquire of God, that we may know whether to journey Please inquire of God, that we may know whether the journey on which we go will be prosperous. And the priest said to them, go in peace. The presence of the Lord be with you on your way.
Sorry. So, 3 mistakes already. Micah decided to have his own church in his own house and hired this priest. The Danites were supposed to have done what God told them to do and conquered the land where He sent them. Because you won't prosper somewhere else. God sends us to a specific place, a specific church, a specific neighborhood, a specific whatever, a specific job. That's where you're going to prosper. That other job may offer you more money, but when you get there, it's all going to fall apart. That company closes down, it gets bought by somebody else, and then you're just like, what happened? Well, you took the better offer. You didn't take what God told you to do. Where He sent you, you would have gotten promoted 5 times and made twice as much money as they were offering. But you took that other thing, and now that company got bought out and you got no job. So we only prosper where God sends us. So the Danites didn't want to go where God, it looked too hard. They would have had to have a fight. They're looking for somebody easy that they could take over. And so that's their second mistake, is they're not where God told, they're out of position. Because God has his blessing waiting for you in a certain place. But you're out of position to receive it. And he's not going to change. Remember when we were talking about Paul. Paul was supposed to go to jail 3 times. He avoided going to jail. When he finally got to jail, there was an angel sitting there. Like, where have you been?
Right.
I'm here. I mean, if you had just gone into jail, like, 5 weeks ago, I could have given you the information then. But then he told him what he's supposed to do. And so sometimes we are avoiding what God has for us. Because we think, well, that couldn't be God. That's too hard. Or that's too... And it's exactly God. So the Danites were wandering around looking for a place. So that's mistake number 2. Then they asked this priest. The priest wasn't where he's supposed to be. He'd been assigned to Judah. But he went, oh, this man's going to pay me 10 shekels. They weren't paying me enough over there. I'm going to go over here. And so they asked the priest, what should we do? And the priest said, oh, yes, go. God's going to bless you. Well, none of them are in the right place, right? So you can't trust what that person is saying. And he's not trying to be deceitful. But at that point, he could be hearing any spirit. Because once God is speaking to you over there, it's like turning to the wrong channel. I'm not going to get Lucy on the horror sci-fi channel. So you're not going to hear God when you're over there. Right? You got to go back to where God is speaking. Oh, now I hear you. Right? So who knows what you hear when you're away from where you're supposed to be. Right? And people can be well-meaning, but you're not even supposed to be asking that person. God told you who to ask, but you're already mad at that person. So you're not going to get the right advice. So he says, yes, go. So they went out and they spied the land and they saw some people that they could take. And so they're like, oh, we can take them. That's going to be easy. That must be where God wants us to be. So let's continue. Judges 18, verse 14 through 16.
Then the 5 men who had gone to spy out the country of land answered and said to their brethren, do you know that there are in these houses an ephod, a household idol, a carved image, and a molded image? Now therefore consider what you should do.
Now here's what's funny, because first time I read this, I totally had the wrong. They said, do you know what's in their house? They got an idol in there and all this stuff going on in there. What should we do? So what do you think they should do?
Kick rocks.
Not go in there. You would think, like, oh, that's terrible. You would think. Verse 15.
So they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite man, to the house of Micah, and greeted him. The 600 men armed with their weapons of war, who were of the children of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate.
So don't forget, they had gone out and they had spied the land and they saw somebody they could take. And they went back and they got 600 men and said, we're going to take that land. But before we go take this land, where God didn't tell us to go, before we go take that land, what are we going to do about these idols in this man's house? So they went up to Micah and they brought their army with them. And here's what they did. Verse 27.
So they took the things Micah had made, and the priests who had belonged to him, and went to a people quiet and secure.
So they took it all. Instead of saying, don't go in there, or instead of saying, we should destroy all that stuff, they said, whoo, he's already got an idol, and he's got all this great stuff. Let's take it, and we'll take that priest. Yeah, we take all of that. You get a car. You get a car. Right? They took it all and took it with them to that land of those people who were safe and secure. They were just minding their own business. God had never said, go take over those people. So he went to those people who were quiet and secure. Go on.
And they struck them with the edge of the sword and burned the city with fire.
They killed all those people. Killed them all, burned down the city, and then they built their own city. So they got idols that they shouldn't have. They got the priest who's rebellious, and they're in the wrong place, and they killed those people, and they built their own city. That's the tribe of Dan. Go on, verse 30.
Then the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image, and Jonathan the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land.
So they had their own priest. Jonathan is that young man. That's the name of that young priest. His name was Jonathan. He was the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh. I'm going to explain explain that in a second. And they just made them their own priests. So Dan established their own kingdom with their own idols, their own priests, and until the day of the captivity, meaning for 200 years, they had their own thing until finally God took them and captured them and took them off to Babylon. All of northern Israel went into captivity. And when Dan came back, they continued to worship. So they became the most idolatrous of the tribes. And they were no longer, we don't see Dan's name in the Revelation. Because they became so evil and so bad, and God hasn't even mentioned it. In fact, some people think that the Antichrist is going to come from the tribe of Dan.
Wow, wow.
So, verse 31.
So they set up for themselves Micah's carved image, which he made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh.
So all the time that you know, they worshiped God in Shiloh, and then David took the ark and took it to Jerusalem, and they worshiped God. All that time, everybody's worshiping God. They kept worshiping their idol, the tribe of Dan. Now, Jonathan, we're going to identify. Jonathan is the son of Gershon, who's the son of Manasseh. So this is a bad spelling. The original Vulgate, the original Latin translation of the Hebrew. So the Bible's written in, the Old Testament written in Hebrew, and then the Romans came in and translated it into Latin and gave it and passed it all over the world. Then the Greeks came in and they also translated it. The Greeks and the Latin, the Romans, they argue over this one word. Some of them translated Manasseh. But I'll tell you how it should be translated is Moses. But there's a little mark over one of the letters. If that mark is not there, you would say Manasseh. If the mark is there, you'd say Moses. Okay? So, your translation may be one of the ones. It depends on, so the American Standard, the New International, different. Either you believe the what's called the Septuagint, which is how the Greeks translated it, or you believe the Vulgate, how the Romans translated it. Yes, sir?
Basically, 13 tribes, 12 stood with God.
No, there's 12 tribes. One of them got kicked out.
That's 13.
So God took one tribe and just divided it in half.
That's what you said.
Okay, yes, it's 13 tribes that got kicked out.
No, I said it was 13.
Right, I said there was 12, but you're right.
I'm not trying to be right.
Yes, you are. Because I said there's not. And you said there is, so only one of us can be right. So you're correcting
What
me.
you telling me? You said it was.
I'm saying that there's 12 tribes. There's 12 tribes. One got kicked out. So he's divided the land of one of the tribes he's divided, he's giving them a double portion. There's still just 12 tribes. But it's still how you're thinking it. It's how you're thinking it, Antonio. It is how you're thinking it. It's
Now, I
correct.
was reading what you told me. You said it was 13. 12 stood with God, and one God split in half.
Right, there were always 12 to begin with. There was never 13.
That's what I was saying. No, there wasn't 13.
Well, he probably explained it better than me, so let him explain to you after Sunday school. Because he probably he's hearing what you're saying and I'm not hearing it correctly. So, let's look at Exodus chapter 2, verse 21 through 22.
Then Moses was content to live with the man, and he gave Zipporah his daughter to Moses.
So, when Moses escaped from Egypt, remember after he killed that guy, then he left. So he gets married to Zipporah. And go on, verse 22.
And she bore him a son. He called his name
Gershon. Moses' son was Gershon.
For he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land.
The name Gershon means stranger. Moses' son was Gershon. It's not a common name. Moses' son was Gershon. And Moses' grandson was Jonathan. And the people who translated it were so embarrassed that they said it was Manasseh's grandson instead of Moses, right? The Hebrew says Moses, but when the Greeks came in, they translated it Manasseh because I think the translator thought, oh my God, we can't say that Moses' grandson. What would people think? So they put a little thing over it to change it to Manasseh. But the Romans translated it correctly. Yes, sir.
Wouldn't it make sense to them that it would be Moses since he was a Levite and Manasseh is not a Levite?
Right, it made sense to the Hebrews, to the Jews.
Yeah.
They understood, but the translators, some translations will say Manasseh. Even the King James says Manasseh. But it was Moses' grandson. And that was like shocking to them. How could how could the pastor of that church, how could their grandchild be so horrible? That happens. That doesn't guarantee you anything. It has nothing to do with birth. It has nothing to do with birth. Does that make some of the... I grew up around ministers' kids.
Yeah.
When all the ministers would go to conventions, all of our kids would all hang out together. Right? Our parents were all at a convention and all the ministers' kids would hang out. Some of those ministers' kids were the worst people I've ever met. And some of them were the best. But, my goodness. So, but you have to make your own choice for God. It has nothing to do with what your parents did. But people think, oh, because my daddy's this or because my grandfather's that, that means I got it made. But you have to make your own choice. And so Moses' grandson became a priest for the tribe of Dan and led them totally astray. And so much so that they're not even mentioned in the book of Revelations when he says, one from each of these tribes, they leave them out totally. And he just divides Joseph in half and says, here, you can, I'm going to give, it'll be, I'll mention you as the 12th tribe. But we know that the false prophet is a Jew. He says that one beast came from the land. So some people think he's from the tribe of Dan. That's why he wasn't mentioned. Because that's where he comes from. Okay. So, let's go to the final page here. Back to Revelation chapter 14, verse 2 through 5.
And I heard a voice from heaven, like the voice of many waters, and like the voice of loud thunder. And I heard the sound of harps playing their harps. Harpists playing their harps. They sang as if it were a new song before the throne, before the 4 living creatures and the elders. And one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. So,
while people say, well, what's God doing while all this stuff is going on? The Antichrist is there, and he's over in Israel, and he says, I've got 144,000 Jews who aren't going to believe him. And they're going to be sent a message. It's like, I heard a song from heaven, which is the gospel. Basically, the gospel. They sang, as it were, a new song before the throne. They're singing praises to Jesus, and they're singing, and the 144,000, they are hearing the right message. They're hearing the song that the messengers are singing, the angels are singing. So he's saying, don't worry, even when the Antichrist has the whole world fooled, I'm going to have people who will hear correctly what God is sending. And they'll just know, something's not right. You have all experienced that at one point. You've been in the crowd, and everybody's going, yeah! Everyone, something's not right. Does that make sense? You've all had that experience where they're all loving this person or this thing or whatever's going on, but something's telling me something's not right. That you're hearing heaven's song. You're hearing heaven's song at that point. And that's what he's saying. The 144,000, they're going to hear from God. And they'll know this man is not really who he says he is. Verse 4. So there's 4 qualifications that goes with them. So we'll read verse 4 through 5.
These are the ones who were not defiled with women, for they are virgins.
I'll explain that.
These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being first fruits of God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no deceit, for they were without fault before the throne of God.
So first, not defiled. So there's 4 qualities. Not defiled with women, they're virgins. Okay, remember the harlot that the Jews were always called, a woman who keep prostituting themselves. So he says they're virgins. They haven't prostituted themselves. I mean, they're literally virgins. It means that they haven't sold their souls. They haven't prostituted themselves by going over to other religions or worshiping other gods. So they just stay pure to God. They follow that Lamb. They're obedient. They are the redeemed from men. They kept themselves separate from what the world is doing, being first fruits to God and to the Lamb. The first fruits were always, whenever the crop would come up, the very first fruits they would give over to God and take to the temple, and so that God would bless the rest of the crop. So a lot of times we like to wait. Let me wait and see how much my paycheck's going to be, then I'll know how much to give. Let me wait. But he said, no, when you get that first, give it to me, and just trust that I'm going to give you the rest. Right? The first fruit. Give me the first fruits, and then I'll bless the rest. But if you wait to see, I don't know how much to give to God yet, because I need to see how this month's going to go. Right? He says, give it to me at the first of the month, I'll bless the whole month. I'll bless the whole month. But if you wait to the end of the month to check out, see what God is going to do, that's showing a lack of faith. I'm just saying that's a godly principle. I'm not saying change your lives, but that's a godly principle of the first fruits. So he says, they're the first fruits. They're the first ones to hear my word. Other Jews are going to follow them. But I've got 144,000 who are going to be like the first fruits before the rest. When no one else is saying this is God, these are the ones who they don't care. They stand up for what God says, even though no one else is following. They're the first fruits. And then it says, and in their mouth is found no deceit. Meaning they don't lie. They say the truth of the gospel. They're not saying, yes, that he's the Messiah. They're saying, no, Jesus is the Messiah. So these are the qualities of these 144,000 who appeared before the throne. Now the last is proclamation of the three angels.
Wait, what about the part where it says without fault before the throne of God? Before the throne of God?
Right. They were found with no deceit, for they were without fault before the. When we stand before the throne of God, good question. We stand before the throne of God, there'll be those who either worshipped the Antichrist or worship Jesus. So they won't be able to look at them and say, well, for a few days I worshiped the devil and then I get. They'll be without fault before the throne of God. From the beginning, they knew. Now, if some people were fooled for a minute and then they finally realized and turned, that's cool. They're without fault before the throne of God. So, and this is also a time period where you're going to go straight from this to the throne of God. These people are not going to die, we'll see, before Jesus comes. So they're going to live, and they're going to fight the Antichrist, and then Jesus shows up, and then we're going to be before the throne of God, and he'll judge one way or the other. So they'll be without fault, for they will never at any point have sold themselves over to the Antichrist. Now, the proclamations of the three angels, and then we'll be done. Verse 6.
Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and springs of water.
So the good news is that the gospel also will be preached to all nations. Most of the Revelation is focused on what's happening in Israel and in the Middle East. But the angel and what the Jews are going to do, the Jews who are going to believe the Antichrist and make a covenant with him, and the Jews are going to fight against it. But the gospel will be preached to every nation, every tongue during this time. And there will be people in churches and on street corners and with megaphones. Don't believe him. He's not who he says he is. But most people drive by and honk and laugh. Well, this man's solving all our problems. So you're crazy. So the gospel will be preached, but unfortunately, most people won't listen. The second angel.
And another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication.
Babylon, at this point, and we will see later, is referred to as the Jews. You're Babylon. And so, and there are, well, yes, certainly just like Jim Jones, but there are, I don't want to say this will sound, there are Jewish people that have been spread out all over, right? And these are God's people. They're peculiar people. God has a calling on them. So they're very successful in every nation because God said, I'm going to bless you and you'll be blessed going in and coming out. So in a lot of the capitals of the world, there are Jewish people who are very successful. That's God's blessing on them. That makes the other people in that nation jealous of them and want to kill them. So there's a lot of anti-Semitism that goes on in the the world because there's something special about Jewish people.
Did you say in their nation or in the nation?
In whatever nation that they're in.
Oh, okay.
So if they're Jews in France or in
So
Spain.
some people hating on the.
Right.
Okay.
In America, there are
Okay,
people
okay.
who go into synagogues and want to burn them down and shoot people up, right? They don't even know why. They just get possessed by the devil and will just walk in and just shoot. They don't even know why, some of them, right? That's the devil trying to destroy them because Jews are going to be successful because God, that's a sign to us. God saying, these are my people, and to prove it, wherever they go, I'm going to make them more successful than anybody else. So whenever I talk about all my rich friends, trust me, 99% of them are Jewish who are just really successful. That God just blesses whatever they do because it's a sign. He's doing that on purpose because he said they're my people. So, and as we are obedient to him, God will bless us too. But he's going to bless them especially. However, when they turn their back on him and done their thing, then they've also led people astray in every nation, if that makes sense. However way they've been blessed, with money or with this or that, if they're not dedicating it to God, then Jewish people might have created the porn industry, for example, or this or that. You know, they've been successful, but when they're not using it for God, people have followed them. So he says, you drinking the wine of their fornications in every nation. So be careful, because now my judgment is coming on them all over the world. Now my judgment. So if you've been following them, be careful. Babylon is now fallen. And you got to know to turn to God and not to that industry or that other thing that is coming against it. Right? Okay. Then the third angel, verse 9.
Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast in his image and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image and whoever receives the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus.
So during this time, it's going to look like the beast is winning. He's going to control a lot of the world, and a lot of nations will be listening and believing him. But if you buy it and begin to worship him instead of Jesus, and the more secular we become, the more easier it is to worship a person and not God. Atheism is on the rise, and it's just very easy to say, no, there's no God, and put your faith in a person. So he's warning. The judgment is coming. Day 7 is coming. He owns day 6. And so he's going to control the world, but if you do it, you will burn, and your torment will rise forever and ever. The smoke of your torment, not the actual torment, we'll discuss that, but the smoke of it will rise forever and ever. So do not. This is your warning. You will not be able to say, and every time you laugh at some preacher on the street, hey, look at that person. What else could I do? I left tracts in your car. There's churches in every corner. You will not be able to stand before God. I didn't know. Yes, you did. I had a whole book all about it. You just decided not to go, and just decided not to believe that. And you wanted to believe in technology or science or whatever, and make that your God. Not that technology is evil or science is evil, but you can't make that your God. Those are just tools that God uses. But even when you go to the doctor, hopefully the doctor says, well, we just have to pray, you know, that God will help you find out what's wrong with you. The doctor's not God. He's just someone that God is using. Right? It's okay to go to the doctor, but you know who the real source is. So, he's warning. Do not put your faith in these things. Put your faith in God, or you're going to be in trouble. And because here's the patience and perseverance of the saint. Do not give in. Do not give in. So we'll start with here next week. Revelation chapter 14. I'm so glad you guys are joining with us as we go over this. Let's bow our heads. Father, we